I don't see you. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor. Thank you again, Sash and Landezine. And the topic of the meeting is interesting. And as you just said, Professor, I think if we want to avoid this kind of drama or comedy, I don't know, we should try, architects, to take more time to build the problem before to find a false solution. You know, architects, we are full of false solutions because we don't build the problem. When I say build, that we don't investigate in all the layering, all the layers were, as you said, why the people don't accept this project, why they should, or why they don't. So writing and reading, or to write and read and write the project, the landscape. I would like to start with an anecdote, maybe, about reading, writing, and landscape. In '76, I was with a project with children. I have no time to explain that it was part of I have one side of me who is really dedicated to the play, the importance of playing, which is foundation of any cultural attitude. So we play with the world. When we are a child, Winnicott, the psychologist, told us that a child is able to take a piece of the world and make something else with it. He found a piece of wood and he made a horse. So he said we should be accepting this paradox that a child is able to create something because these things exist already. And I think as architects we deal with what is already existing and we transform it. And this is very careful because it concerns, it's not like a painting, well, it's a social task or attitude. First image of a territory in nearby Geneva. This is a black and white pictures of the 30s, which is maybe more adequate to what I want to say than the nowadays color photograph. The landscape was more readable. So I'm not reading an essay, so I jump from one sentence to the other. But what I want to say is that, of course, a landscape is full of histories. It's full of stories. There is, as you said, Professor, it's an imagination. I mean, there is no landscape without story. Absolutely no. And we can use a theory or possibility of a concept to understand things. For example, I would say, now if you look at this image and in one piece, it's difficult to analyze. What are you doing? What are you saying on these images? Now, if I take the theory of three nature, you know that maybe John Dixon Hunt reassessed this theory, which is based on the first Latin Cicéron say there are two natures. The first one may be the mountains, the shape of the world, given world, geological one, morphological, the morphology of the world before man, let's say. And then immediately you see the countryside and you see that the second nature, according to Cicero, it's a man-made landscape. Not to make beauty, just to make survival, to live, but maybe with beauty. That's another story. We can discuss what is beauty. So you have the second coat of this mainly agriculture, also bridges, roads, houses. And in the 16th century, there was a guy, a couple of guys in Italy, Renaissance, who said, well, there is a third nature. Third nature is a garden. And the garden has a reduced portion of the world, a representation, and these gardens are made with, they are talking about the relationship of a cultural moment between the first and the second nature. In few words, what are we doing with the world given to us? How are we transforming it? So if you read that, you can start to say that there is a morphology, there are activity of humans, and this line of poplar, this is a project I am going, so I will call it for the moment linear gardens. So we have these three things. I don't know if this story, this concept is really, you could have a false concept, but it's useful to work. It's very good. It helps me. Maybe it's wrong, but it's wrong. It's always good to move, to start. If a tool helps you to work, it's a good tool, and then you can adjust it. This, I show you the second one. So there is a shift between this landscape, traditional landscape, and then in the 30s, the same landscape was modified, transformed, with a 4,000 kilometers of drainage. No, not 4,000, 400 kilometers of drainage in the plain, a bit of eradication of the traditional landscape with all the variety. And of course, this is the type of work you see. So these are drawings, and I use drawings a lot. I like to draw. I draw because I can't do anything else to understand the problem. I mean, it's a very useful tool. It's physical. It's difficult. You have to make hundreds of drawings before arriving to one which is maybe good. And these are imaginary landscape of what, according to the reading of a historical map, I could dream. It should be. Maybe it was a bit like this, and maybe it was a bit like this after. It's not so flat, but so I wanted to have something very complex, and then something more radical. So, doing these drawings, I already enter in the process of designing a project. It's not that you draw and then there is a project. And these projects are helping me to choose. That means to build the configuration where I could make a design. So what you see on the top of the image is the river with a meandering, and then the short circuit of the canal, which was built in the 30s, let's say. I simplify. What is interesting, now I'm trying to follow more or less the title of the events, reading and writing. And this landscape is full of projects like this one. I found it in the archives of Geneva because I work a lot in the archive also. So it's part of the routine. I can't work on a terrain without going to the historical maps or gravure, engraving, and everything, images I can find in the archive. So I found this, it was a project, the same, the linear one I showed you before was the one built. This one was 60 years before it was done. So the territory is full of stories, but also full of design never built. And they are interesting, because the guy who did that already thought, and apart this, they were, we found this. I was, I think, the first to open this roll. It's 3 meters long. After it was drawn in end of the 19th century, it was put in the archive. No one. I was really rediscovering this, but it was a precious document because the geometers, you may see that there are 135 transect sections and 2 longitudinal sections made after 1 year. So 1 year, and they made another observation 1 year later. So we can see in blue, different blue, the movement of the river. And the sections, we have 135 sections in the archives with all the measures. So it was really a scientific, this investigation in the archives were really useful for the engineer to build the project. That's the result of the 30s, an incredible tool to evacuate the flood. So it was very, very powerful and efficient in terms of avoiding the flood. Avoiding the flood on this site. You send the problem downstream. That's the way you solve this flood. You give the flood to the others. And it's a disaster in terms of biology. Of course, it's waterproof, and so there is no more exchanges of water between underground water, and so it's a dead. When there is water, it's beautiful. No, it's a perfect engineering design. But when it's dry in summer, it's like a sewage. It's dégueulasse. So again. Early drawings, because I insist that it's my way one of my way to try to understand also photography. It's a beautiful, if it was Leonardo da Vinci who did it, we kept it, I'm sure. But it's not signed. Now, it was also the same place where, on the right, I made one project, Park in Lancy. It's a garden, a small park, a small garden. Now I'm confessing something now. I was born in this territory. I spent now for the project I'm going to see 20 years of my life, but when I was 6 years old, I was playing on the very same plot where I had to build something. And I have no time to show it, but we had a discussion with David Cooper, the psychoanalyst. And what is the problem when you draw or design on a place where you were a child? So the first conclusion is that you have the larger body, and what you have seen when you were little was gigantic, and when you are seeing the same thing, it seems very small. So there is kind of contraction of dimensions, and it's very interesting to remember this. Winnicott said once, this guy, a psychologist, he said he gave birth, also he was a pediatric, gave birth to 60,000 babies, he said. But he never had a baby himself. But he said, well, at the difference of many parents, I never forget I was a child. So I think also a designer should never forget his primitive states of what is you were saying about the reaction of people, but the reaction of babies, of fragile people. Imagery of architecture is interesting. It's always sunny. Have you already seen a competition with rain? You don't win. Always young ladies. Never seen a guy reading a book, for example. They have all balloon or bicycle or jogging. I think it's it's comic, but it's also, if you think, it's a very, how is it possible that a profession is at this level of representation, so vulgar, so stupid, so criminal in a way, introducing in false ideas, false. So and then you have the reaction that we are sinner. It's half true, no? Not to say completely true. Now I go on. We had I just want to show one thing about this project. It is this one. It's about topography. Now we had to deal with the underground foot passage for children coming from housing to tennis club or something like this on the other side of the road. So they enlarged the road at that moment, so they asked us to make a pedestrian passage. Actually, the engineer had already done a concrete tube under the road. And we proposed an alternative which was avoiding to cut all the trees, the bosque and the little valley. But now what you can see on it, that this little valley, why it was blocked by this mountain? It's a kind of a inheritage from this drainage system. So they put, normally if you make a bridge, you can go under the bridge and the children could go under the bridge. But now they have blocked the passage, so they can't do that. So we said, the municipality, the people ask, you have to go from one side to the other, through the mountain, the Remblai, but also you have to come from the left side, the right side to the left side of the rivulet. So the first topography for me is reading the site. Topographine means to describe the site. That's exactly the translation from Greek. It's a description of the site. It's called topography. So an intense topographical investigation gave us the conclusion, well, if you go through a Remblai, it's a tunnel, and if you go from one side to the other side, it's a bridge. So what we do, so we said, we put a bridge in the tunnel, which was a way that we always kept, that we want to give a solution, but we want to let the problematic situation readable. Now, why is it it's stupid to make a 100 long bridge for 1 meter width of the canal, of the rivulet? But there is a contraction of the problem founded and the solution proposed. And there is also, because we are with poets, kind of a chain of association, because now if in French you say tunnel for the train, no? Tunnel. But it comes from the garden tunnel, which is a greenery tunnel. And this tunnel went to England in the 11th century with the invasion of England, of the English on France. And then it was, they pronounced tunnel, and it came back with a train. So we have a tunnel in the tunnel, you know, because also this, you see, this is also a tunnel. So we have a tunnel in the tunnel. Bon, now, this is a territory of this is a watershed of a river, which is it's a torrential system and regime, and sometimes it's very difficult, and I mean, it's 100 maybe. Well, you can see that it's a certain danger. So there was a competition in 2000, and we won the competition. It's a first drawing, but you know, this canal, for the program, implicit program of the canal, of the competition, was you destroy this bloody straight line, because it's unnatural. There is no so-called, they said there is no, the straight line in the enemy of the pastoral attitude, no? They said there is no, you have listened this, no? There is no straight line in nature. I've my doubt when I see through the clouds the ray of light of the sun. They don't make like this. But they told me, no, it's not nature. It's light. So it's light. It's out of nature. So nature is full of straight. But they didn't like this as a canal. And we were 4 competitors after our first selection, and we were the only one to say we will keep the canal. It's exactly like the tunnel. We wanted to give a solution to the flood, to the biology, to the environmental requirement that we have to better, but we wanted to make it readable. So if you destroy the canal, you destroy the possibility to see the shift from one side. But we have to transform it. We have a beautiful historian now in France, Patrick Boucheron. He's in Collège de France, and he has written intensively on art history also. He's a specialist of Italian Middle Age, early Renaissance, and he said that memory could only be built through transformation. He said it's a process of transformation that makes memory built. He said we have to take from Antiquitas, he said Antiquitas, only the active part is useful to make the present link to the past, but never because otherwise you enter in this mummification and it's dead. No, you lose everything when you want to keep everything. So he said you have to be careful. Now that's your story of the fontaine. How you transform these presents, plats. So this to be careful and to be founded on a careful transformation. But the measure of the success of a place, and I think your city has something unique when you come from Geneva. There is what Benjamin called the aura. He gave a definition of the aura. He gave many definitions, but one I kept in my head is it's a presence. In front of a work of art, you see if it's good or not because there is a presence. Something, and he said, what is a presence? And he gave 2 definitions. He said, it's very far away and very present. If it's not present and only far away, does not work. He said, it's a collision of space and time. And it's why when we transform in our project, we must be careful with description, and then prescription and that. So you will say that. But we have to be able to read and accept that the landscape is full of stories that we have to discover. So we said we will keep the canal, we will transform it, and we will shift the river parallel. Other people destroy the canal and put the river in the former meander, which is a strange idea of history. History is not going back; it's understanding what happened. It's not so simple for many reasons. Well, you can't see that, that's a problem. Yeah, this image shows that, a river is like a tree, it's not only the trunk. You have a chevelu, so it's all the watershed. So when you restore, I will come back on this problem of restoration, but that means that you have the necessity to go as possible, as much it's an urban stream full of, we have very, very restrictive condition to liberate the flower, the river. But what we wanted to express is that you have to go to detect or to help the river to be. And so we proceed by steps, different phases. The first phases was, we were a team with biologists, engineers, architects. They all talk about landscape, but they have all their ideas of landscape. No? Biologists, for them, a landscape, it's a quantitative thing. They can measure if the quality of the number of butterfly, of species, of quality of water, and they make a matrix. And architects have their own, and engineers, they don't know anything about for them, landscape was like they never work with the landscape. They have a simplistic idea. It's nice. Landscape is nice. So we made not so what we call the experimental. The river here was in a two-side concrete, so we just broke the concrete. We didn't do much, but we also protected some delicate water elements, so with the pedestrian walk. But it was once again more a kind of tuning the theme. Then we had a flood. It was very fortunate because it was a piqûre de rappel. So we have to make the project in 2002. And we start with, as I said to you, far away to protect. I can't explain everything, but to protect, normally a river, the flood, there is no problem if there is space for the flood, because the flood very, very fast, calm. But if you put in the flood area housing, that's a little problem. So we had the housing, so we had to protect with a large dike. So it was really a huge scale. It's about 8 kilometers long, the project. So we had to work with the biologists, the agriculture. We have three intervened, the agriculture world, the biologist or environmentalist, and the promeneur, the walker, I don't use the term user now, but inhabitants who wants to go to the river. It's not a natural reserve. And they're all competing here. So these bridges are, you see that it's very collecting surface water, but letting the traffic of heavy truck, because it's a greenhouse area. And then we have this surface water, and then the canal, and I come back to this. And the children invading it's strange, when they talk about biodiversity, they never talk about children. Beautiful butterfly, no? Now, the third phase is maybe the one I can explain more or less, more speed with the time given, and it's more characteristic. So you have here the former canal, which is now a linear garden. So the canal, the section of the canal was 3 meters down, and we reduced it to 1 meter. So we have the footprint of the canal, and we kept the water fall, which every 300 meters, 400 meters were built to break the energy of the water. So there were elements, first of the presence of the former architecture of the canal, but also very useful water moment. And then you have a promenade in yellow, and the new space for the river. This is a design of the drawing of the competition, and it's interesting because it shows that we don't know how to design a river. What are you doing? What kind of shape you give to the river? How designing a river? There are two possibilities. There are possibilities. Engineers, they know exactly how to do with the slope, the amount of water, and etc. They will design you a sinusoid, more or less, and they will fix it with a concrete or block. That's not scientific, but a technical way of making a river solid. And you have a cultural model, let's say, by landscape architects. They have a romantic, pastoral English river in the head, and they build it with no rocks, but gentle green technology. And the first flood, the river does exactly what she wants, and destroy engineer and cultural model. So we said we don't know what to do. So the best thing, we had a good engineer, is to get rid of a certain amount of earth and to let the water design. That's the best thing. Immediately, if you have kind of a space for the river, and the river starts to design. The problem is that it needs time and water, of course. And the river, they always design because they need the strength and powerful. Only they design when it's a big flood, and there was no big flood. So the people started to come back, said, "Oh, it's not good enough. There is not enough biodiversity of the new bed, morphological diversity." So we were looking for, now we are entering in how to design a river without designing, but accelerating the process of erosion. And by chance, it's not by chance, but reading some book out of the architectural field, something with a scientific, talking about percolation before Paolo Vigano. But percolation is a process, one of the definition, it's very complex. It's how a liquid goes through a porous milieu. And they have a matrix, the scientific. It's hexagonal, because it's like, when you have cloth and you let a ball, you don't know where it goes. And we thought, maybe we could have a kind of original launching matrix, which would help the river without definition of its design. And we made a first model, because we said, I was in the office, I said, we have chocolate, we put some water, milk, and we said, yeah, maybe it's possible. And then we had to convince all the experts, because it's a project of 70 million Swiss francs or euro, and it's largely financed by the Swiss Confederation. So we have a lot of experts. And when we designed this model, our engineer was saying, it's a bit too much, but to be short, all accepted the experience. They said, well, why not? So we did as in the second etap or phase, we just get rid of a certain the humus, most fragile earth, and then we design it, but you don't see it well. We design the chocolate plate. I mean, it's a 15 by 8, and we dig it, and it was very interesting to see this work with a different material, and we arrived to this and this, you know, and this, and this. And then we let the water enter, the sky with us. We were fearing that the river would choose one channel and let the other. So we said we would have been stupid too. But no, the river was gentle, and the contractor made a good living. And you know, I go fast because otherwise you have no time. But now you have erosion. And you know, now you can read again. If I try to tell you all the story about reading, writing, I could say we have written on the earth. No, we have designed. It's my way of writing. But you know, going through Leonardo da Vinci's The Treaty of Water, dans ses carnets, he talks a lot about movement and tourbillon, what you call turbulence. So you can see that this, the point, the summit is never touched. And also, and then in other scientific, like Isabel Stengers, they call about, if you go to thermodynamic, and you see that what they call diversification and lateral erosion. So, and you could have a kind of a superposition of scientific, very present studies, and then the drawings of Léonard Vinci, who was like a child, saying, why? Absolument captivé par le mouvement, by the movement, what is going on with water. And by the way, he said in his writing, when you deal with river, first the experience, then the thinking. And it's true that you have to look really what is going on. Now I go, you see. And now we have when you make an experience, you have to monitoring the experience, what is going on. So we have drawn, and you see the pattern. So the result is an acceleration, incredible. So everyone is very satisfied because it's really an innovation, let's say. No one never did that, and it's going full speed and much better, you know. You see, and this, you can't design this, you know. And now these images are maybe 6 months after we put the water, and now after 1 year, if I don't know the last slide, but it's an extraordinary erosion system. And we make drawings, and also we have scientific measure because we have to know exactly what is going on. Now I have just tried to describe what we did with the river, now what we did with the canal. You see now that this is why this part of this 2 kilometers long is the most emblematic part of the project, because you see that was the canal and now the new part. And the confrontation, we call it a kind of open-air laboratory. We try to do something to better the environmental, but we want this being understood by people. who like this. And so how to make, and this is why we come back on the gardens of the three nature. The garden is a place of knowledge, of pleasure and experiment in the history of garden. So I say it's a series of linear gardens, not to say gardens. And insist also for a problem of naming and precision. It's not a park. I don't know what is a park. It's active. A garden is a place of reflection and pleasure, and so you have to have this presence. This is some view. So we are very classical. We put pergola like it's a classical garden, and all this is necessary for mastering. Now you see, we kept this falling down, so it's part of the charm. You can go there, and they go, and it's excuse me, it's too many images maybe. We have a large benches, or we have a lot of furniture, which are, if you put a bench or a table in the nature and it's too small, it's absolutely like putting an office furniture in the nature. It's ridiculous. So we have to exaggerate. So it's 6-9 meters long. So even if you are alone, it's okay. But if you are with the table, so, and the one there is a table for the children, so you don't see the difference. But and we have a blackboard in concrete. So I have no time to go on with the playground. But really, the garden, the linear garden, is made also for the children. We are classical up to the point now. Usually they said, well, Descombes is a minimalist and he's no picturesque. And now, it's a bit boring to make always the same. Now, if you could start, Picasso said you don't have to copy, you have to steal. That's different. And the worst is to copy oneself. That's because you are dead. So when you do a project like this on 20 years, 18 years long time, you have a double problem, or to change always, and every year you have a new design, new material, marble instead of concrete, or you copy yourself. I mean, you don't take risk anymore. So this one, I by chance, the borough landscape, this figure, when you put in the forefront mountains, your garden go to the Alps. It's a trick of a Japanese or Chinese or English. So So we did it. And this part of it's also reading the site, and to be honest, we saw this, it was the contractor who left these mountains, temporary, and then when I saw this, I said, we keep it. So it was a reading of the site during the work, and a reading of the treatise of Yang Yu, master of Chinese treatise. So it's a superposition of reading, writing notes, writing project drawings, which I think a project is absolutely multi-layered and should be complex, not complicated, but taking the maximum of association, or collagistic, associative, to make the people enter in this, and you project the people to the Alps and so on. There are dikes also. I want to master the quantity of waters going to, but so there are moments of inner gardens really. So we also. I can't explain everything. I'll let you see the image, but this part is possibility to go nearby the water. So it's not only the vision of water, but a kind of a intensity of attractiveness for the children, for the people, to step down up to the water with a cantilever slab that you can touch, you can smell, you can hear the water, no? Not only being too far. It's very dangerous to be too far. I worked once with Jean-Luc Godard, and he was criticizing a photograph. He said, well, you know the cows, Swiss cows, or Slovenian cows. If you look from far, they look all the same. But if a farmer who is near, he knows every cow. So Godard said, well, to the friend, I will not give his name, you shoot the cows too far, and the actor is the same. You have to come near. It's the same attitude, you know. There is a danger that landscape is always outside. You know, this slab, and these are like stone, and now I have still a bit memento, because I don't know if I will ever get to the Swiss pass, but now I would like to enter in literature. At one moment, here, the special spot where this reluctance to take with us a picturesque manière or way of doing, or quotation, or literature, we were obliged to there is one thing before, excuse me. No, when I was in London at the Architectural Association in East End, I have taken this photo. I loved that. You know, usually you put the way the parallel, perfect. And these guys, and I thought, so I have also. Pierre Legrain was a landscape architect who made the Villa Tachard. He made this zigzag. So we did it. So it's just an observation of a reading. Means I have seen 30 years ago, 40 years ago in London, something which is still there. Then Tachard, and I write that to avoid this parallelism. I hate to walk always in tubes, you know. So I like that. And you know, Tachard, Legrain was also making books. So you have this curve and the zigzag, and as my father was a bookseller, it's an homage to Matos. It's a psychoanalytic. Another on this very same spot. Now enter Mr. Rousseau. When he was 17, he was born in Geneva. He left the city and never come back, well, for a long time. And when he flew the city, not exactly flew, but he didn't re-enter an evening, he went to a little village which is here. So we are here with this road zigzag, and the river was here, and this is Confillon. And Rousseau spent the night with a priest who gave him food and bed, and then he went to his destiny. So when you have such an incident or a fact, what you do, like Hamilton Finlay or Kinas, you write Rousseau was here, and I quote Finlay and Kinas because they were able to do that. I'm not criticizing, but it's not my way to do. So I said, how to, so you could have, literal, you put a plaque here. Rousseau had a breakfast with Jeanne d'Arc, or I don't know, something. Or you ignore it, which is most of architects would ignore it, or what? And if you think the importance of Rousseau in the shift of the appreciation of a landscape from terror to sublime, it's not possible to ignore it. I mean, this is part of the complication. So we had the bridge destroyed, and so I was really at that moment reading all the book, I mean, Rousseau, Les Confessions, at least, Rêverie du promeneur solitaire, and La Nouvelle Héloïse. And each time he was talking about or writing about landscape, I underline. And it's full of story. And so I thought, Mr. Rousseau is my client. He likes ruins, he likes trees, he likes table, he likes fountain, he likes... We are going to give him everything he likes. And, you know, at one moment, Rousseau, in a confession, he said when I was 17, going to Annecy, I was walking, and two young girls with horses were running, and then after 1 kilometer, they found the girl fearing to cross a river, and Rousseau helped them to cross the river, and then the girl said to Rousseau, come to house, we will give you some coffee. And the story is that he goes up into cherry trees after the meal, because the girl said, well, let's go to the orchard, we will have a cherry. And he was sending to the girls. And one, you don't see it, but the cherry entered in the breast of this young woman, and it was the description of emotion, of the emotion of Rousseau is really interesting. So we had here the summary of the Rousseau attitude. We have a river, he likes river, ruins, a fountain, table, trees, and an orchard of cherry trees. Now you can say, but if I don't tell you the story, you don't understand. You can't understand it, or you can't get it. So I found in Rousseau the excuse for not having any explanation. He said, I love, he was a very good connoisseur of the plants, of course, as you know. But he said, I hate people who have a utilitarian use of the plants. For example, he was always ill. He said, I hate people who said, if you go to you will take chamomile, it's very good for your stomach. He said, I have had a stomach ache. Please, I see a flower, I don't want to, it's to avoid to think about my stomach, so don't come back with this story. And he says something also, which is that we experiment with the landscape architects, not landscape architects always, but the guys who know Latin words, the Latin denomination, which is good. But you should not abuse of this knowledge. You should rather keep it for you. Usually, I have been testimony of a battle, a prise de power, of imposing the Latin name to a guy who does not know. So you have a chap. So he said, I hate this guy. He knew himself, but he said, all these guys who talk about the name of the plants, they only see what ils ne voient que ce qui ne se voit pas. They forgot to see the beauty of the plant because they see only the name. The name, you don't see the name, so you see only the name and you forget the plant. So I thought, if the people, and it's really going like this, you have children, mother, they come and they appreciate the site. So I say, Rousseau was right. No? They have the same sensation, or tranquility and Rousseau. Maybe you think I'm completely out of the theme of the evening, but now how you make a ruin, and this is another story. We found the rest of the bridge, and we thought now we can put that, how to design a ruin again. Bon. At the end, we put that like this. I had in mind this sculpture from Tony Smith, by chance in Basel. 1010 is the name. So this kind of dramatic. By the way, the fountain, which is at the end with the column nearby the city hall, has an interesting. It's a Baroque. It's 1751. I love. It's full of block like this. So I made a lot of pictures today. And I found Lorrain. So what you have seen in concrete, when it is, I copy this. Just to avoid, just to have some link with these guys. There is it's a sea, but it's not a river. But so this is, well, you don't see. There is a block, just okay. And it's nice to see these little birds in the ruins, So it works. There is a kind of a presence, I think, a serenity, and I think, if I try to be serious, that this presence or calm that you have here, we have a poet in Switzerland, in Geneva. He's died, but Peter Handke has translated it into German. Ludwig Hall. He said, because we were talking about what is imagination. For me, imagination is always, it's about reading. It's, and also Baudelaire said the same, it's not fancy. It's not fantasy. Imagination is always, Ludwig said, it's a way, a manner to elevate the temperature of, rising up the temperature of existing things. And Baudelaire says the same. He said, it's always from what is existing that you put an intensification. In imagination is how to transform what you don't see, or what you see not with a powerfulness enough. And I think if this little child or the teachers, I think Rousseau helped a lot to do that. So this detour by literature seems a bit academic, but it's very effective, I think. And it's also a way to push you. I think a good project, you must take risk. Again, if you copy yourself. A project, you understand what you have done after. Michel Foucault, he said, I write two sorts of books. The one are very risky. Then scaffolding, where I go ahead of what I am sure of. I try something. And these are the first book I write, he said. And then he said, and then I write other books, much more systematic, methodic, and in short, they describe the method I should have followed to write the first ones. And I think it's really a kind of a work of art is not a painting, is not an illustration of an idea. It's a risk, and then you can understand what you have done by it. Maybe. C'est difficile. How to start? It's a project made for a commemoration of the 700th birthday of the Swiss Confederation in 1991. So it was a walk. It's why I was talking, around the Swiss Uri Lake, and each canton, we have 26 cantons in Geneva province, had a certain number of. I had 2 kilometers to deal with this path. So we work. This is a place very full of history or stories. It's a place where they invent tourism. The English were there. There was a chapel English. Queen Victoria was there. They were with so it's a territory completely written, false, completely man-made, but presented as a. You know, they had golf, and so you could notice that the little Swiss boy are barefoot, and the English have good shoes, as usual. Now, one thing is a link to the river is a pass. You know, the idea is that because it's a very, very heavy commemorative tendency of this. Nationalists saying, well, this is the birthplace of the Swiss Confederation. It's completely mythologic. And the pass should demonstrate the firmity, the solidity of one pass. We knew exactly where we were walking in the history. And you realize that the pass is always changing. So that's a problem. No, so we made a kind of archaeology showing that the past was not always the same place. You know. And when it was some stone were lacking, we had concrete blocks, not stone. This is part of a strategy of the shock. To make a shock is to renew the attention through emotion. And we work with one artist. Maybe I will stop with this. Because it's Richard Long, of course, he is very well known for his work, and for example, we were talking with a professor. You know, architects, we are paid to add to the world. Maybe in the city, so many over-designed square or markets, or I don't know. In Geneva, it's crazy. I mean, they can't see something without adding something. And this work of Richard Long is a brush pass in Nepal. He went with a broom and he just took the leaves out. And that was for me a manifesto. We should brush rather than put another layer of. I was jealous when you can see that landscape architects to make that strong figure just with cutting flowers. You know. I think I dreamed to make a project which sets an economy of means. This is real minimalism, maximum of intensity, minimum of means. So he said, I prefer to be in the world. He is not link, or it does not like the American landscape land artists like Michael Heiser, or who I'm not criticizing, but I'm saying Long is rather saying the world teach me more than I move the world. So he's in a position of inquiry, of understanding and moving something. So he made the turn of the 36 kilometers of the Swiss pass, and so we had only 2 kilometers, but Richard Long made the 36 kilometers. It was a way to say we are Geneva, but we are also linked to the other. And he made what he called maybe a text work. That's interesting because I will read something he has written. Text work is not a promenade, a quiet promenade. He's really going fast. He told me, because we had discussion, he said, I have to be like an athlete, because otherwise I am going to wander and there are too many things coming to my mind. So it was, so he notes on his carnet everything, a sound, a squirrel, moment of nature, moment social, a marriage, a noise, and he made also, he stopped at 7 times, he made a pile or cairn of 100 stone. and he called it 700 stone for 700 years. For me, he was really playing with us this kind of pacification of this commemorative blah, 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 saying, let's see a bit what is reality. And so the kind of message could be, the history of your country is maybe 7 big moments, commemorative, but also the everyday life is part of your history. It was a very, very nice thing, and I can read what he said about it. Will be a transition with the poet. In fact, one of the reasons why I started making textworks is because it gave me another kind of possibility, not using a camera or not necessarily making a sculpture. I can use words and they can give me different possibilities than I would get from using a camera. So, taking photograph does a certain type of job, records one moment, makes an image, and works do a different job. They can usually record the whole idea of a walk, maybe much better. They just have a different function, sometimes a more complete function. And he was really a key. We selected 3 artists, and now I stopped. But Long was really the guy decisive to, as you said, Robert, Bruce Chatwin, all these kinds. And at the end, this kind of acceptation that the world is full of stories. Every landscape is full of stories. There is today, the last word, when we talk about the river project, it's called renaturation, renaturation. And this is completely wrong. But this is another chapter we could discuss, because this attitude is absolutely now discussed by anthropologists in the Collège de France, Philippe Descombes, which is refusing the binary categorization of nature and culture. That there is no nature as such. It's always a mixture, a collaboration of and this idea that you have a pure nature where you can return is really, I don't have time to develop this, but it's against this that we have done also the keeping the canal, because the danger was to eradicate the canal, and in other projects they did it. So, okay, you eradicate the canal and you return to a pure nature, which is a phantasm. And so you have after a few years, the people would walk along this new natural river that we have done, and they would say, oh, it was always like this, but they have no more canal to see the shift. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry to be so late.